Uh, Good morning, my students. I think today we are ready for this class, and I will begin right over here. As you all know that we had already done previously most of the things, and for today's lesson, I think we will cover very much, and we will focus on the colonialism and independent movement. So I want us to be ready. Have your notes, have your books over there. Write notes, write your summaries, and everything will be good. So as we dive in directly, I would like to have a very good and interactive class. I dislike a very dark class, and that is too much disappointing. So I love that today we will be very serious, and at least let's participate. Everyone participate. All my students, you should participate. This is a very interactive session, and you all know that. We will forge ahead and begin our lesson right here. So, on our today's lesson, we will focus what is colonialism. Colonialism, simply, this is the policy or practice that implicates the acquiring full or partial political control over another country. So, as you all know that this colonialism, I have explained, and you already know what colonialism. You all know our country, Kenya. It was colonized. So, what is meant by to be colonized or to have a colony? So, as we have discussed what is colonialism, I want us to see the key characteristics. You see that these colonies are these occupying settlers always come with their own reasons. They have these political reasons, economic reasons, cultural domination, and other things. So we find that, for example, of this example of the colonies are like British Empire, French Empire, Spanish Empire, and others. So we must provide a clear and concise definition. So you, in your exam, I'll be expecting. I need detailed information. I need you to use an example, illustrate everything in a detailed form. So I'll dive into the next part. What was the motivation? Or simply, what motivated colonialism? So, as I have discussed in the previous slide, and you already know, let's go to the chart and discuss on this, the motivations of colonialism. The first motivation of colonialism is economic motivation. What is to be meant by colonialism motivation? This colonialism or colonies came to acquire the resources, raw materials, and the cheap labor from the Africans. So we find that that was their economic motive. They were economically motivated. They knew when they come to Africa, they will acquire resources and the new markets and cheap labor from the Africans. Another motivation also is political motivation. What is political motivation? We find that these empires, British, the German, the Spanish, they were competing for these political motivations. They wanted to expand their territories, power, prestige. You find that when a country, when they colonize, or when they colonize a country, they feel that they have that power, they have that prestige, they feel entitled to that country. The next one is social motivation. What is social motivation? My students, we have discussed in various things normally. So what is social? To become social, huh? Social motivation. So we find that spread of religion or civil missions and other national glory. So in short, we can explain by this note where I've put it right here. Explain how this motivation interconnected and influenced these colonial policies. We find that these colonies came with various interconnected colonial policies. So I want us to dive into the next one, the impacts. What was the impact, economic impact? What was the social impact? What was the political impact? So on the economic impact, we find the exploitation of resources. On the social impact, we find the introduction of new cultures. On the political impact, we find the suppression of local leadership. So I think we have covered that, but I'd love you to go deeper. Let's go deeper on this issue. We find that what motivated these colonial people, the colonists, to these colonialists to come to this Africa and to do these economic things, social and or both political. So when you are reading through this, remember, don't in every slide that we have discussed, I have put notes or note this, discuss both positive and negative impacts, and use what? Specific examples. So when I am marking your work and I find that you have not provided examples, you have not deeply illustrated, we are not going to discuss. That is a zero. let's dip into the next slide. The impact of colonial rule. What was the impact? That is self-explanatory, and I would like us to have a broad mind when we are discussing this topic. Don't make it to become a much or a harder thing. So let's go to the impact, the economic impact. We find that these British colonies or German or any other, when they came and exploited the Africans, there was this economic impact. We find also on the social impact, we find there was this political impact. So on the economic impact, majorly, I would like us to go deeply. Let's go deeply and get detailed information. So on the economic impact, we find that the exploitation of resources, cash crops economies, we find even in Kenya, when the British were around, they tried to make the cash crops to become compulsory. So if you don't have cash crops in your farm, that was they couldn't deal softly with you or swiftly. Social impact. We find social impact, introduction of new cultures, religion, education, and other forms. Political impact also, suppression of local leadership. What is the creation of these artificial boundaries? So if that was the political impact. Let's dive into the next one also, the rise of nationalism. So as we went up on this colonialism topic, colonialism and this thing, we will go directly on the rise of nationalism. So what is nationalism? Nationalism is a political, cultural, or social movement characterized with promoting interest of a particular nation. Factors lead to, what are the factors leading to the rise of nationalism? There is economic exploitation, cultural suppression, political oppression, and world wars. We find that we need to dive deep in order to understand the reason, what is nationalism. This is coming together. Let's dive into the next one, the key figures. So this one, I won't explain much in this. You go read deeper on the key figures of anti-colonial movements. You will find this Mahatma Gandhi in India. He was a leader. He led the movement of non-violent resistance. Nelson Mandela, South Africa. You all know, you are Africans. And you are one of the Pan-Africanists. Always a historian, beat your chest and say that I'm a Pan-Africanist. You desire for change in Africa. You desire for change and the movements. What's it called? Positive movement. We find in Vietnam also this guy called Ho Chi Minh. He was a communist. If you all have read that book of who is it called? This guy in Ngugi wa Thiong'o. He has mentioned this guy in Vietnam for this Vietnamese independent movement. The Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, you all know him. I have tell you, my students, always be a Pan-Africanist of your own. Beat your chest and fight on this thing. Let's dive in to the next slide. Strategies of anti-colonial movements. What were the strategies of this anti-colonial movement? These people never wanted, they decided for change in their countries. They had strategies. They had the ways in which to fight this colony, these bad people. They came and wanted to change our cultures. They came and wanted to change our norms. And the African culture was a strong one. There was civic or civil disobedience. Nonviolent protest was one of the example of civil disobedience. Armed resistance. Mau Mau. Let's come to the Kenya. Mau Mau. We found that many leaders fought in this armed resistance. Diplomatic negotiations also, where they saw that they could not fight these colonies. They involve this, what is it called, diplomatic negotiation, where people sit down, they decide on one thing in order to find a solution. Propaganda or public opinion, building support for the cause of through media and public relations. Let's now dive into our next slide. Decolonization process. We find that what is to decolonize, my students? I taught you in the previous lesson about decolonization and the beginning of decolonization, effects, all this. I taught you factors leading to decolonization, World War, anti-colonial movements, and the change in the global perspective of everything, climate change and everything. Challenges faced in the newly independent nations, challenges faced by the newly independent nations. So economic instability, political corruption, ethnic conflicts, we will find this. So discuss the complexities of the decolonization process and its long-term consequences. Let's now dive into our next and the last. I will have us to now have a positive and interactive, and we finish swiftly on our topic today. So we conclude. Let's conclude our lesson. The recap of our lesson summarize the main ideas covered in the on everything. What we have discussed. I have presented to you a very good notes summary, and I will really point out the key figures on what we have discussed today, and I will post it in the forums that I'm planning to give you today. So the significance and the understanding of this colonialism, independent movement. So emphasis on what I would like you to really do, emphasis on this importance of studying the past and understand the present day challenges in the global issues. So as we end the lesson today, so I would like us to have a go. I will look for you some questions on this colonialism and independent movements. Try to read, my students. This is not a hard topic, and all will be well. So thank you very much for your time and everything. Be blessed.